So we're gonna start recording now. All right, so I'm just patting it as dry as I can. And this is just gonna help getting it less watery, because otherwise you're gonna have a lot of water in your lasagna. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do now that I've patted this down, now we're going to assemble the lasagna. So I have the pan here, and the first layer that we're going to use is the tomato sauce. Okay, so we just want a nice thin layer of the tomato sauce on the bottom. So I'm just going to take, I'm gonna use a spoon. So first, I'm just gonna use a small amount, and it's just to have a thin layer of the sauce. Okay, and once I have just a little bit of the sauce on the bottom, I'm going to put my first layer of zucchini. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place them. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be best to put it. I'm going to see. Now, when you're looking for the zucchinis for this, because we're slicing it would be better to find the zucchinis that are straight. You don't want the ones that are going to be curved, because you're going to lose more of the zucchini when you're trying to get the slices of it. Okay, and it's going to overlap just a little bit, but here we have one layer. Okay, so once you have the layer of this, we're going to put we're going to put some of the ricotta mixture, and then we're going to put okay, so it's going to be the ricotta mixture, the mozzarella cheese, and then sauce. Okay, and then that's going to, and then the zucchini, because we had the zucchini on top of the sauce. So I have the mozzarella cheese over here. Okay, and we're going to do, so we're basically doing a third of the ricotta mixture and then a third of the cheese. Now, obviously, as opposed to what I just did now, it's better for you to do it in a few small clumps and then have it in different areas so that you don't have to move it around as much on top of the zucchinis. And I already have the oven heated to 375. They both bake, I believe, at 350, but what I'm going to do is I'm heating it to 375, and then I'm going to lower to 350 as soon as they're in the oven. Okay, so we have the ricotta, then I'm going to sprinkle some of the mozzarella. Okay, and then we're going to go with some more sauce. And now we're going to do about a third of the sauce. With any lasagna or anything that you're doing layered, I mean, basically you're taking all the ingredients that you've made and you're pretty much just portioning them out until you've used it all. Okay, next we're going to do another layer of the zucchini. This one's a little longer. We'll keep it there. Okay, so I have my next tray and I'm going to pat that one dry as well. While I'm patting this dry, I just want to check because I'm trying a new thing. Do all of you see my two screens as if they were in speaker view? Maybe? No?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get all three screens. So you'll have different views of me all as speaker view, and even though the microphone is only on one of the cameras. Okay, so we have one more layer, and then again, we're gonna do the ricotta.
Liron,
Yes.
looking at the quantity, I think I would make 50% more sauce, correct or not?
50% more sauce for what?
She's looking at the quantity and she thinks she would make 50% more sauce. I'm not sure if I understand.
Oh, I mean, if you like it to have a lot of tomato sauce, then yeah, you can go ahead and do a larger quantity of sauce. At the end of the day, it's evened out. But if you really prefer it to be the tomato, then yeah, you can go ahead and do more sauce.
And Wendy's saying, would that make it more watery?
So you're gonna see, we're gonna do the tomato sauce. We're cooking it basically to reduce a lot of the moisture out of the sauce. So it's not that watery, but yes, obviously tomatoes have a lot of water content, so it would be a little more watery. Okay, and this is gonna be the last layer of the zucchini. So this was about 3 zucchinis. If you're, I mean, you can always cut a little more and use it for something else. You can bake them or fry them or something like that if you have extra, or you can just cut the 3 zucchinis and just divide it by 3 and maybe spread them out a little more if they don't fit exactly in the pan. Now for this top layer, just because I like it this way, what I'm actually going to do, I have a little more tomato sauce left. And so I'm going to do tomato sauce on top of this ricotta mixture underneath the mozzarella. So I want the mozzarella obviously to be on top, but I want there to be a little bit more of that tomato sauce underneath it. So I'm just gonna put the rest of this. And then I'm gonna put the rest of the tomato sauce. And you'll see the next lasagna, the tomato sauce for it has more vegetables in it. This one only has onion and garlic and some fresh basil. But if you want to add more vegetables, different vegetables, I mean, obviously you're not going to add the zucchinis that the other one has in it because you have zucchinis in the lasagna itself. But you can go ahead and add eggplant, you can add red bell peppers or other kinds of peppers. You can add whatever else you want to the sauce and maybe use more of a sauce from the other lasagna with different vegetables, but with this lasagna base. Okay, so now that we have everything, I am going to cover it with foil and put it in the oven. And for all of these lasagnas, they're baked while they're covered with foil, and then mostly baked with the foil, and then without the foil just for a little longer. Okay, so we're gonna put this into the oven. Okay, and as soon as I have the other lasagna in, I'm gonna turn the temperature down to 350. So for the second lasagna, we can put this aside. Second lasagna, it doesn't have the ricotta mixture, but it does have a bechamel sauce. So it's still layering with the bechamel sauce, tomato sauce, and mozzarella cheese. And mozzarella. Okay, so, and again, here, we're going to put a little bit of the tomato sauce before I put the noodles. And then it's the same layering with the noodles. And it is important to try and make sure that you use the oven ready noodles. And those you don't have to cook before you use them. All right, so we're going to, this is our tomato sauce for this one. So as you can see, it's a lot chunkier. It has pieces of zucchini and pepper in it. Okay, and I'm gonna go put a small layer of it. Okay, and then I'm going to put a layer of the noodles. And if you need to break up the noodles to make them fit, then break them up. But as you can see, this is the 9 by 13 pan, and it fits perfectly lengthwise. So you can either do 3 and then cut 1 in half. It's gonna fit better the next few layers because it's gonna be wider farther up. So I'm actually just gonna have it overlapping just a little bit because I'd rather not have to break the noodles. That never breaks well when you cut it lengthwise. Okay, so do you, oh no, I did not put them at all in water. I'm just using them. All right, so we're going to put this, and then we have bechamel cheese sauce. Again, bechamel cheese sauce. And here we're doing the same thing. We want it in thirds. And for the top layer, I'm going to add an extra layer of sauce between the bechamel and the cheese if I have a little more left. So the bechamel has now set a little bit because I have it in the pot and it's cooled off a little bit. But I'm going to use about a third of it. And here you can see the bechamel. And of course, if you really like it to be cheesy, go ahead and use more than the 2 cups of mozzarella. You can use 3 cups. That's totally fine. You can also use the 2 cups for the middle of the lasagna, and then on top, just add extra. Depends on what you like. Okay, have some more sauce. Tried that and it sticks together. You've tried putting in the noodles in hot water first for 5 minutes? Is that what you're talking about? And yes, that makes sense that they would stick together if you would do that. The spinach I put in, this has been cooked into the sauce for about 1 minute. So once the sauce is ready, the last step is putting in a little bit of chopped spinach and just mixing it until it's wilted. And again, you can add more spinach depending on what you like. This is actually a pretty small amount of spinach. You can definitely add more spinach. And now for this size pan, so I'm using 4 noodles for each layer. So if you're gonna have 3 layers of noodle, you really only need, counting is hard, 12 noodles. So 1 box of these would be enough for that. Bechamel is next. Kind of just spreading it all over. So obviously with lasagna, once you have everything prepped, it's just a couple of minutes to assemble it, and then it just takes time in the oven. Depending on how many vegetables you want in it, then it'll take you a little longer to do it. And yes, this is a 9x13 pan, I believe. It's in the store, it was a quarter pan, so I believe it's equivalent to a 9x13. Okay, cheese. I'm gonna put about half of what's left from my sauce here so that we'll have the other half for the top of the lasagna. And I seem to be a little more skimpy on the bottom, and then I add more as I go on because I am eyeballing it. I want to make sure I have enough for all the layers, and then the top actually has a little more of the sauce. Okay, and then our last layer of noodles. Last layer of okay. And I'm gonna put the rest of the sauce before I put the cheese. Okay, spread it out. And the rest of the mozzarella cheese on top. Okay, and the same with this. I'm going to cover it with foil and put it in the oven. And I'm just going to lower the temperature now to 350. And I'm going to set my timer for the regular lasagna because that one needs a little less time to cook. Okay, so the timer is set for that. And now we are going to start working on the sauces. So I will do the sauce for, we'll start with the sauce for the zucchini one. So I'm going to move this so you can see. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to start both. I'm going to do both sauces simultaneously, just so we can then do the bechamel sauce after these are done. Let's move this closer here. All right. So I'm going to bring my everything for my sauces that I need. Okay, and the first thing for both of them is the same. We're going to start with the onions. So we're going to put the olive oil and the onions. Okay, okay. Okay, so I'm going to put the olive oil in, and hopefully I'm the only one hearing squeaking. Okay, if anyone else has any more questions, Elisa has to leave. So if anyone has any questions and I don't notice that they pop up, please go ahead and just ask me. So I'm putting the olive oil in and then the onion. So they're both both have one onion. So it's the same amount of onion.
What's the difference between a sweet onion and a brown onion? Does it matter to use one or the other?
It's just going to be sweeter and not as, they're not as harsh like on the eyes. Their flavor is going to be more mild and sweeter. If you like onions, you can use regular onions. But the sweet onions are going to be lighter in the flavor, and it's going to give you a sweeter flavor and not that raw, harsh onion flavor. All right, we're going to turn this down a little bit. Okay, so we're going to cook this for a little bit so that the onions will soften. And then the next thing to add after the onions have softened for both of these is going to be the garlic. For this one, there's 3 garlic cloves for the zucchini one and only 2 garlic cloves for the other one. You can interchange the amounts and you can do them closer to the same amount. It's not, that's not as important. If you like garlic, add more garlic. I mean, I love garlic. I would put even 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. So we're just gonna let this cook just a little bit. So for the zucchini one, the ingredients we have is going to be garlic. We have salt and pepper for seasoning, chopped up fresh basil. If you don't have fresh basil, you can go ahead and use dried basil. You can use dried oregano if you want to add some of those flavors. And we have a can of diced tomatoes. For the second sauce,
Liron, are the tomatoes drained, the diced tomatoes drained, or they have?
No, straight from the can. You want that moisture from the tomatoes because you want it to thicken. You still want you want to cook down the sauce and get a more intense flavor rather than not having that liquid to begin with. For the second sauce, the one with the vegetables in here, you can play around with it. You can check it a little bit, change it up. I have some diced red bell peppers. This camera. I have diced zucchini. and garlic. And then I have the spinach, which I really just cut up into small pieces. You can either chop it up with a knife or you can just tear it up with your hands. It's gonna get wilted, so it really doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be very small. Okay, so now that the onion is starting to soften, I'm gonna go ahead and add the garlic. And here is where they differ a little bit. So the one with the vegetables, we need to put in the vegetables, and those vegetables need to soften up a little bit before we can add the tomato base to it. So I'm gonna add the peppers and the zucchini. And then we need to continue cooking that for those vegetables to soften up a little bit. And you want to keep it on medium heat. I would not go up to high heat because then you're just going to burn them and not soften them. Okay, and then for this one, we can go ahead and I'm going to add the tomato sauce and the basil and the salt and pepper. It's not sauce, it's the diced tomatoes. Okay, and the basil. And salt and pepper. And for anything in this recipe that has salt and pepper, you don't have to follow the amounts that are on there. You can just season it accordingly to what you like. You can put a lot less and then just add more. Each person can add more depending on what they like when they eat the lasagna. If you want to try and cut down on the sodium and just use a lot less, then you can always add it later once you're eating it if you feel like it needs a little bit more salt. So for this one, I'm going to keep on stirring this until it softens a little bit. And for the tomato one, I want it to come to a boil, and then I want it to simmer until it's all cooked down. So if you can see the difference between how it is now, it's very watery, and when I was using it, it was all the water had gotten cooked down and it got much thicker. Okay, so this we're going to continue to cook, and I'm going to start and talk a little bit about the bechamel so that once one of those is cooked, I can go ahead and do the bechamel sauce. So the bechamel sauce has 5 ingredients. I'm actually going to heat up the milk one more time. So the bechamel sauce starts, it basically starts with the roux. So it starts with butter and then flour, and you cook that together. Once the butter is melted, and you cook that until until it turns golden. Now, obviously, the more you cook it, the more of that caramelized flavor it gets. But you don't want it to be you don't want it to really be brown. You just want it to get golden. And you'll see when you mix it together, it'll start out with like a tan color. And then as you cook it, it'll start getting more of a golden tint to it. Once it's golden, then you add the milk in. And I'm heating up the milk in advance in the microwave because when the milk is warm and not cold, then it won't seize up as much when you stir it into the cooked flour with the butter. So it really is important to have the milk warm and not to add cold milk, because it'll help get a smoother bechamel sauce. You may have clumps otherwise, and it's fine if you have some clumps. I think you're always going to have some clumps. It's not always going to be 100% smooth. All right, and then once that thickens, we're gonna stir that until it thickens, and then once it thickens, then you take it off the heat, and then you add the Parmesan and the salt and pepper. So we're gonna keep on cooking this for a couple minutes. All right, I'm actually going to switch up. So I'm gonna take this off of the heat, even though it has not reduced enough yet. I wanna do the bechamel sauce. We can always put it back on afterwards. And I'm gonna switch this around. So we're gonna put this here, put this aside for a minute. The vegetables here are almost soft enough for me to add the tomato sauce to it. I'm gonna put the butter in this pot. And we're gonna let that melt. Now, if you don't want to try and make a bechamel sauce, you can also go ahead and take the ricotta mixture from the zucchini lasagna and use that instead of the bechamel layer. You can see if you like those flavors together. You can really mix and match, and you don't have to necessarily do it the way this is. Although the bechamel is really makes it very sweet. All right, so once the butter is melted, I'm going to add the flour. Now, you can see that the butter is not all melted, but it is bubbling. So I want to lower the heat a little bit. I don't want it to bubble too much. I want the butter to melt. Okay, and now for these vegetables, I'm going to add the tomato sauce to that, the tomato, diced tomatoes. We're going to continue cooking that. Okay, and the butter is almost all melted. Okay, so the butter is all melted. And now I'm going to add the flour and I'm going to whisk it in. And you can see that it's a kind of a beige color. I'm going to continue whisking it until it starts getting a little golden. Here you can see color. And now for this tomato sauce as well, we want to cook it until it has thickened. So until the water has reduced a little more and it's not as watery. I still want the waters to begin with because we want the water to get reduced, not that we don't have it to begin with. Once that has cooked down enough, then we'll add the spinach to it. Okay, now you see I've stopped stirring it for just a minute, but it's getting a little golden, so it's a darker tint now. And in just a minute, I'm gonna add, I'm gonna add the milk. Now the way it pours here, it tends to spill from the bottom, so I'm placing the whole measuring cup above the pot so that if it drifts, it'll stay in. And it's gonna bubble up to begin with. Just doing a little bit at a time and stirring it in. Ooh. I want to make sure that it gets mixed in evenly and that I don't have clumps. That's why I don't want all the milk all at once. I'm opening up the flour and making it a smooth texture. Okay, now I can add a little more. And all the rest of it. Okay, now we're gonna cook this until it gets a little bit thicker. Okay, so you see how it's very loose right now? We want it to cook, and it's the flour in here that's actually going to thicken it. This is a little. All right. I'll also send you a correction, a new recipe with the added mozzarella cheese for the zucchini lasagna, which I forgot. Okay, so it's still very loose. See, it's starting to bubble. I don't know if you can see that it's starting to bubble. But it hasn't thickened up enough yet. So this is kind of like when you make pastry cream or lemon curd. You want to cook it until it has thickened. And if you're not sure if it's thickened yet, so it probably hasn't thickened yet. You're gonna feel it. It's gonna have friction. And then once the Parmesan gets added to it, it'll thicken it a little more because the Parmesan will melt. So that'll change the texture as well. Okay, just another couple of seconds. I can already feel it getting thicker. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off. So it's much thicker now. And I'm gonna go ahead and add the salt and pepper to this and the Parmesan cheese. Okay, and we're gonna mix that up. Okay, so you see now it has, it's very, much thicker. The cheese is making it nice and smooth. Okay, so the bechamel is ready. So that's that for the bechamel. I'm actually going to set that aside for a minute.
Liron?
I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to put the tomato sauce back on here just for a minute so I can show you hopefully how it looks at the end while I'm going to cut the zucchini. All right, I want you to
Is that bechamel, is that kind of like a fettuccine Alfredo sauce too?
It kind of starts the same. So, because all of these sauces start with a roux. It's actually a roux like if you do a homemade mac and cheese, it'll start with the roux as well. That'll help thicken it and it'll give it a nice flavor. Okay, so to cut the zucchini. I have a cutting board somewhere. Okay, so like I said, to cut the zucchinis, we want, I'm gonna try and bring it over here just so you can see. We want to try and choose the zucchinis that are as straight as possible. Okay. And not curved. So, okay, we have here two options and you can tell the difference. So this one is much more curved. You can dice it, but I wouldn't use this one for slicing. So we want one that's more straight like this one. You're not going to lose as much of the zucchini when you cut it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm cutting off the two tips first, so the two ends. And then I'm gonna start at one end. So I'm holding it lengthwise against the knife, and I just wanna cut off just a little bit to get me a flat surface. Okay, so I just cut a little bit to get the surface. I'm gonna throw this out, I'm not gonna use that part. And then I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch next to it, and I'm gonna carefully slice it. And then I'm gonna go that way all the way to the end. Now you're gonna get as thin as you want, and if you like thicker pieces, go ahead and cut thicker pieces, but then you're gonna need more zucchini to layer in the lasagna. Okay, and obviously it's going to be much easier if your knives are sharp. Okay, now when I get to the end, if I feel like I can't hold it much anymore, so just for that last slice that I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take the knife between my fingers. So I'm holding the zucchini at the two ends, and I'm going to take the knife between my fingers so that I'm holding the zucchini on both ends and carefully give it one more slice. I'm not using the ends. Here, I can give it one more. I'm not going to use the ends, the two far tips, but the rest of the zucchini you can use. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slices out of this, but it of course depends on the size of the zucchini that you have. All right, so we can move us back over here. And now for the sauces. So this one is already much thicker, and it's ready for the, a little more. It is ready for the spinach. So I'm going to add the spinach to this one. Okay, and stir that in, and we're just going to stir it another minute or so until the spinach is wilted. Okay, and this second one just needs a little longer. Okay, does anyone have any questions in the meanwhile? All right, so this sauce, you see that the spinach is already wilted. Let me try and lift it for you guys to see. Okay, so the spinach has wilted into the sauce, and really there isn't much liquid left anymore. That one is done. And then this one still needs just a little more, but it's already, a lot of the water has reduced in this one as well. and it's just gotten a little thicker and less watery.
Liron,
Yeah.
does it matter whether you use whole milk, 2% milk, or?
I would use either whole milk or 2%. I wouldn't go less than that.
Okay.
You do want the fat content of the milk to keep it creamy. I wouldn't go, because then it'll just be very watery. All right,
Also,
so, yeah.
I have a question about when you put the foil on your lasagna.
Mhm.
Whenever you do that, when I take it off and the you know, at the end of the baking process, I always have the cheese stuck to the top of the foil.
Yeah, so if the lasagna is high enough to where the foil will touch the cheese, I can definitely see that happening. I would try, if the lasagnas are that high, and it may happen here too, if the lasagnas are that high, try spraying your foil with a little bit of pan spray before you put it down. So having that spray part touch the cheese, that should eliminate it from sticking. You may want to then just pat it dry a little bit. You know how there's always, like, pizza has a lot of oil on top. It may get a little oily on top, so you may want to just pat some of that oil off, but that should prevent it from sticking.
Thanks.
And I see Elisa's writing to me that there's also a non-stick Reynolds wrap that you can get. I don't know. I've never heard of that. But if you see it, you can try that, and it'll probably just have the non-stick things on it that'll prevent the cheese possibly from sticking as much. All right, so now this is actually done. So it's not, there's still some liquid in it, but it is.
This is it. People can see that.
Yeah, you'll be able to see here. I don't know if you can tell. So there's still liquid, but it's not watery anymore. All right, you don't want to dry it up completely. You do want to have some liquid left in it, so that it'll also be easier to spread over the lasagna, but you don't want it to be too watery. All right, is there any other questions?